Hey guys, just before the video starts, I've created a gaming channel where I'm gonna start streaming video games and posting them on there for people to watch later. Please go and sub if you're interested and comment what games you're interested in seeing me playing. It could be an old game series like Fallout, Arkham, could be new stuff, could be retro, could be Minecraft, who knows. So yeah, just let me know. Anyway, enjoy the video. So I was watching Cha Cha Real Smooth the other day and I've been ill, so I'm just trying to rewatch a lot of comfort movies, and it reminded me that Cooper Raiff, the director, had only made 2 movies, which is insane to me. I was looking up what his future projects were and it gave me an idea to talk about some of the directors I think we all should be looking for in the future, whether that be names that are going to become mainstream successes or names that I believe are just going to produce some very interesting and inspired works in the future. There's no specific order to these, it's not ranked or anything, so I'm just gonna list off about 10. Starting with our first pick, who is the aforementioned Cooper Raiff. Now, like I said, he's only made 2 films to date, and his work on Cha Cha Real Smooth is enough to warrant permanent interest in him as a creative. He writes, acts, and directs, and because of this, his work just feels so personal and controlled. I adore this movie because it's a coming of age story for those who have already come of age. You know, I've just passed the exact same age this character was in the movie, and it encapsulates this time in my life perfectly. He's so detailed in the way he portrays experiences, and he has an absurd talent for putting natural conversation on screen and making it seem cinematic. He puts so much emotion and meaning and history into every sentence. He writes characters that feel like they've existed before the cameras were rolling, and I can't wait to see him elevate that skill whilst nurturing his skills as an actor and directorial visual style. His next film, The Trashers, has no current release date, but we do know it stars David Harbour and is apparently a biopic of sorts about James Galante, who's the owner of a hockey team who is involved with the mob, which is very different for Raiff, so it'll be interesting to see how he tackles new subject matter. It's also a good sign of growth and challenging himself, which I think is exciting. Okay, so our next director is a more well-known name at the moment, and that's Seline Moray, director of Past Lives, which was nominated for 2 Academy Awards this past Oscars in Best Original Screenplay and Best Picture, which is just insanely impressive for a mid-budget indie directorial debut with a relatively D-list cast. But as you might know, this hit my 2023 ranking last year at number 4 out of 139, and though I have only seen it twice, it has already hit my top 100 films of all time. I adore it so much, and I made a video on it that I'm very proud of. It's definitely one of my better videos, and I think it perfectly encapsulates what Song is so great at as a director. I think she was absolutely snubbed out of a Best Director nomination in the last Academy Awards, and I think she has so much more in the tank. The exciting thing about Song is that she handles well explored subject matter in a completely refreshing way. I didn't think much about the way we commentate and communicate on love through cinema could be evolved, and yet she still found a way to do it. Her directing style is sleek and gorgeous, almost effortless, and yet feels like an incredible amount of detail and thought goes into every single shot. Her next film, The Materialist, stars Chris Evans, Pedro Pascal, and Dakota Johnson, which is a great lineup, and sadly seems like she's going back over already covered ground, but I'm positive she'll find a new angle to approach the subject. Then of course, if we're talking about 2023 directors, we have to talk about Rain Allen Miller, director of Rye Lane, which is currently her only feature-length movie and my favourite of last year. Now, unlike Seline Song and Cooper Raiff, she isn't a writer on her feature projects as of now, although she did write on a short film, Jerk, but what she does have that the other 2 don't is a very strong and distinct visual style. Rye Lane's visual storytelling and on-screen language is unlike anything else that dropped last year, and I think she has the potential to develop this to create a style as strongly as someone like Wes Anderson does. There's an imperfect polish on this movie, and I think she directs actors so very well. Like, all respect to Scorsese or Spielberg or whatever, but when you have De Niro or Leo in your movie, they're going to give a good performance because that's just what they do. You can aid and help, that's your job as a director, but Rain Allen Miller pulls these distinctly charismatic dramatic, electric, and infinitely charming performances out of every new performer. And she explored this wide spectrum of emotions in just this small runtime, and as far as I know, she hasn't announced any upcoming projects, but I will be there guaranteed when she does, and so should you. Next up we have Jewel Taylor, who's a writer-director who made their feature-length directorial debut as well last year with Who Cloned Tyrone, although he does have prior writing credits on Space Jam: A New Legacy and Creed 2, which at least one of those is good. But Who Cloned Tyrone is his biggest credit to date, and not only in scope but in quality. Being a Netflix original, you think less of this film, but it is genuinely some of the most creative and fun storytelling I saw last year. It placed 30 on my top of 2023 and beat out some incredible competition to get there. It had this retro 70s style of filmmaking with the grain and general filmmaking techniques that really transport you to that time. It's a super fun movie, and I think displays more than anything that Jewel Taylor has a very solid foundation as a filmmaker and will go on to do many great things. I hope his next project does make it out of streaming prison though, because his work definitely is worthy of being on the big screen. Then we have a filmmaker who's a little more known than everybody else so far, which is Matt Johnson, a Canadian filmmaker who started gaining popularity through making Nirvana the Band the Show, but since he's continued making plenty more semi under the radar projects up until last year's Blackberry, which was absolutely phenomenal. Johnson joins Rafe in that he's a director who also writes and acts, and his performance in Blackberry was genuine gold, and the script penned by himself and Matthew Miller was one of the most complex I saw last year. It tackled so many interesting themes and character types and tones, and the general pacing helped by the directing itself was unreal. It was so speedy, everything is over before it feels like it had begun, a lot like Blackberry as a company. But what makes Matt Johnson so interesting and so full of potential was that he admitted to only doing this project so he could get funding to do a movie based on Nirvana the Band the Show, which is a real passion project for him. So if Blackberry is a movie he does as a stepping stone, I can't imagine what his full passionate visions will turn out like. So watch out for him absolutely, and watch Blackberry if you haven't. It was one of the better corporate movies we had last year because there was a lot of them, like Flaming Heart and Air and whatever. So yeah, Blackberry is definitely up there in terms of that, and it was one of the best movies of last year. I think he has real potential to be one of the best on this list. He's a comedic genius who understands drama and tension better than most. Next up is Nida Manzor, who is a director who also had a movie last year in Polite Society. She's an up-and-coming British filmmaker who has a grasp on genre blending I haven't seen in a new director in a decent while. Though I liked Polite Society a lot, it was definitely a new way to take a British film, and I don't think it was anything exactly perfect, but what it was an interesting experiment that I think was decently successful. Manzor blended so many genres seamlessly and shifted between them constantly, whether that be a martial arts movie to family drama to romance film to a heist movie to horror to sci-fi. It flicks between them without caring if it's too much for the audience, and it's something I completely respect. There's an artistic integrity about the movie that speaks very highly of its maker, and it just makes me very interested to see what they do next because there is truly nothing else like it. And back to a more well-known name, Dan Tractenberg. Now of course he's made a name for himself mostly with 2016's 10 Cloverfield Lane, which is an excellent sci-fi horror, and then not much else until 2022's Prey, which to me is the best Predator sequel by a mile. Now of course those are bigger movies than the ones I've mentioned, and of course he's more high profile than the others, and his work speaks for themselves due to the critical response and audience reception, but I mention him because I think he's going to go on to have a very massive career, one far beyond what he's currently attained. He's going to continue making Predator movies as far as I'm aware, with his next project being Badlands, which is set in the future, and I hope to God this one gets a theatrical release unlike Prey, which is one of the most beautiful and cinematic movies I've seen this decade, and we were absolutely robbed of that experience. Also, Prey was the first film ever to feature a complete Comanche dub, which is amazing and I think speaks to the commitment and artistry and respect Tractenberg has, and I think his career is going to be very interesting and hopefully littered with contemporary classics. And now our next director has actually yet to put out a feature, but regardless, I'm putting Caitlyn Cronenberg on here simply off of name alone. nepo baby that I respect and am excited for. Daughter of David Cronenberg and sibling to Brandon Cronenberg, this family pumps out great filmmakers, and with the trailer for Caitlyn's new movie Humane coming out, I think it's a perfect time to get excited about her future. This film has a great cast, and it goes without saying, but any film released by a Cronenberg is worth checking out, so we'll see if she has the chops like her brother and father, but for now, I'm excited. The next two we have are very high profile celebrities but new to directing, the first of which being Michael B. Jordan, whose directorial debut came out last year with Creed 3, and it was an absolute banger. I loved it so much, and though Creed 1 was already a modern franchise classic, I think Creed 3 by far has the more interesting directing style and probably has the most dynamic filmmaking of the entire Rocky Creed series. The way Jordan uses the camera to tell the story as well as utilizing great performances and a solid script is captivating. The final fight scene between Donnie and Dame is hardwired into my brain, and I was so captured by it in the theaters and just as much whilst at home. It's an outstanding debut, and I think Jordan will do the transition from actor to director seamlessly. He's gonna direct the 4th Creed installment, and I hope that one holds up just as much as 3, but I'm also very excited to see what he does beyond this franchise. His close relationship with Coogler has probably given him some direction, since I assume Coogler has passed on a lot of advice, so it'll be interesting to see where he takes it. And finally we have Dev Patel, whose directorial debut has only just released, but with the reviews it's hard not to get excited. I mean, it was so good that Jordan Peele bought it from Netflix to help distribute it theatrically, and I trust Jordan Peele's judgment with my life. It's a huge passion project for Patel, written, produced and starring himself, and I think it's going to be great, and if it is, I think he'll have a very interesting future. Now before I wrap up, there's 3 names I wanted to mention also, but I didn't think it was fair to lump them in with the others since they're way more high profile already. The first being writer-director Justine Triet, the maker of last year's Anatomy of a Fall, which earned 5 Oscar noms and 1 win. She's had a very deep career so far, but with Anatomy having such global appeal, I think her career as a filmmaker is about to have a serious uptick in popularity and honestly quality. Though she has made consistently well-received movies, Anatomy of a Fall is just a generational film that I think proves her competency as a hitmaker. Next is Robert Eggers, who has made 3 very popular and well-made movies in The Witch, The Lighthouse and The Northman, but with his upcoming film Nosferatu, I think Eggers is well on his way to becoming one of the most important and best filmmakers of his generation. He's incredibly reliable and will become a name people will talk about for years in the future. And finally, Jordan Peele, who to me is the best director currently working in horror. He has made 3 classics instantly, and though Nope is one of my favorite movies of all time, I mention him in this video because despite Nope being practically perfect in every way to me, Peele still feels like his best is yet to come, which is a very exciting thought, and I seriously cannot wait to see what he does in the coming years. And that's it. Those are the 10, well, 13 directors I think people need to be seriously keeping an eye on in the future. There's a range of countries, genders, notoriety, genres and all of that, but they all have one thing in common, and that's potential, which is the most exciting part of film. People love to look back. People never stop talking about what was, but I don't think people talk about what could be nearly enough. But that's just me. Do any of these excite you? If so, who? Who did I miss? Let me know in the comments, and whether it's a movie from a director with a bright future ahead or not. As always, keep watching movies.